Hello and welcome to New Earth Awakening. Today we welcome Jole Berlage, a strategic coach with academic roots in biology, anthropology, psychology, and the arts, and lived experience as a highly sensitive person herself. She is the author of Sing from Your Core, the Vocal Body. Her work is not about helping clients cope in a fractured system. It is about helping them see what can change. She helps clients with her trauma-informed deep dive methodology and process. Jole, welcome to the show.
So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also happy that you are here. I love this topic of the highly sensitive person. This is really, as a highly sensitive person myself as well, it's one of my favorite topics. It was one of the breakthroughs in my life when I discovered it, when I finally opened up to be able to discover it. So please let us know how your journey led you to this amazing work you're doing today.
Yeah. So it starts like for most highly sensitive people with a lot of challenges. And then waking up in a way, it's a process, but one day waking up and saying enough is enough. I'm tired of being judged as weak and complicated and different and, sensitivity being basically a dirty word. And with wanting to change that, not just for myself, but for other people. So that's, in summary, the journey.
Yeah, well, exactly. So it all starts with awakening to the truth that is not a weakness, rather a very, very amazing strength that needs to be rediscovered in that way. So how did this journey of rediscovering what a strength it is start for you?
Well, I think it was when I started to use what I learned as a biologist and anthropologist in my work as a therapist, because that's how I, started out what I have been doing for a long time. And, most of my clients were highly sensitive people. And it just occurred to me that the challenges they had weren't just overwhelm. The challenge that they had, the true challenge that they had, is to see their own strengths and to even acknowledge that they had anything positive and worthwhile to contribute. And when I started pulling that apart, again, from the perspective of a biologist and an anthropologist, I said, people that are really good at discerning patterns, that's highly sensitive people. People that are really good at systems thinking, highly sensitive people. Sensing the subtle, highly sensitive people. Understanding that we need community rather than everybody fighting on their own, highly sensitive people. And on and on and on. And I said, okay, that's where I want to go. I want highly sensitive people to understand that they have a treasure trove of talents that no one talks about, because it's talents that are being suppressed by the majority of the system we live in. And I have to say that it is my firm belief that it's not the others giving us permission. It is time for us to stand up and claim our talents and our power. Because if we wait for the system to give us permission, we'll wait another 3 centuries or whatever. So we need to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So that's what I do.
And thanks for doing it by speaking your truth right here, right now, and doing so also everywhere, wherever you go on podcasts. So I love how you say that we need to start allowing ourselves and speaking up, because this is something that has been also very important in my own journey. So let's dive right into leadership, because leadership is one of the very amazing topics that I also really love. And I've been also researching in that myself. So what is your take on how trauma informs the leadership style that people exhibit?
Well, that's a big question. So let me break it up in two parts. So one part would be how our societies have been imprinted by trauma deeply for centuries, meaning that we have adapted to leaders and societies that are malfunctioning, in the sense that they reward cruel people, that they reward people that do not take into account the consequences of their actions, and that do not really care about others, right? Because that is a trauma response. I just need to take care of myself and survive, right? And the other part of your question would go along the lines of highly sensitive people in leadership, that many highly sensitive people are traumatized because they've always been told that there's something wrong with them. Yeah, they've been isolated, they've been ostracized, they've been bullied, they've been, you name it. And that is deeply disempowering. And if you want to go into leadership carrying all that weight with you, it becomes excruciatingly difficult, if at all possible, right? So these are the two aspects of leadership. And we could add a third one, and that's part of the book I'm writing now, is to understand that if, as highly sensitive people, or as deep thinkers, or as deep processors, there's so many names for this trait, you want to be a change maker, you have to understand that you need to build your own systems. You need to build your own stuff, because this is the traumatized system that we have in our society now, in our financial system, in our health system, in our schools, and everywhere. Functions the way it was supposed to function. We have to understand it's not just dysfunctional, it's actually very functional, because it functions in the way it was designed. So if we want something else, we need to start designing other systems, right? And instead of trying to create or being leaders in a game that will never be able to produce the society we would like to live in.
I love this take, it's like, yes, I agree totally with you. There has been a normalization throughout humanity of life negating low vibrational behaviors that some people are so accustomed to that it's not even realized or recognized as a low vibrational behavior that is also not inducive of any, higher vibrational outcome. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? It's like we have normalized that the boss may yell or that projections take place. You know what I mean? So let's talk about how the normalization of these negative behaviors, the HSP bullying, and all of that has played a role in projections and basically the business environment.
Well, the business environment is built around extraction. I have to say that very clearly. It's not built around stewardship. It's not built around the benefit of all. It's built in order to make some people very rich by extracting, and that word, human resources, and what's the other word? Natural resources, but there's another one that's even worse. I can't think about it now. They say so clearly what this is about. This is about using other people in order to benefit financially and in any other kind of way. So this needs to be seen really clearly. We need to understand really this point, I think, is so important, that these extractive systems work exactly the way they were set up, right? And what you said before, I think we have maybe we have normalized it in the sense of, when you're traumatized, you tend to go into a victim state and say, I hear people say all the time, well, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. Right? Well, it's a system. It's just the way things work. And as an anthropologist, I say, no. Sorry. I mean, there are plenty of other ways to organize societies, communities, and human life, right? And it doesn't just affect the HSPs, this affects everybody. And I think we are at the time now to where I think it's becoming blatantly obvious to everyone. And I think that's why it is happening. It's my private opinion. I think this is happening so that people can, it's being stuffed into people's faces, how this actually works. And it's a point of decision in human history, and so it's not just about highly sensitive people, but my take is that it's the responsibility of the highly sensitive people to introduce something new, because it's us that sit so uncomfortably in this old system. It's the highly sensitive people, the deep thinkers, the ones that are different, that just cannot live and agree and thrive in that extractive system. And it brings a responsibility. It doesn't just bring pain or overwhelm or frustration. No, it actually, in my world, it brings a responsibility. You've been given all these talents, so use them.
I love that. We need to all come together, but we are the drivers of the change because we are the ones who feel it first and who realize it first. There comes this canary in the coal mine effect that HSPs have. We sense it, we know it before others even notice it. So I love how you say
Yes.
that.
Yeah. You have that, but I would like to actually, Carolina, take it even further. We're not just the canaries in the coal mine. If you take those talents we briefly talked about, ability of systems thinking, we are incredibly creative and innovative. We can sense new patterns. Every highly sensitive person I talk to has solutions in their head. We sense potential. We want to develop potential. Not every sensitive person to the same degree. So I've come up with this spectrum where, some highly sensitive people are also highly intelligent. So, they might be more creative and innovative in a certain way. Some highly sensitive people are more empathic than most others. So they might have a different role. And then there are those highly sensitive people that carry what I call the change maker aspect. Right? And that's the ones that don't just have this general sense of potential and what could develop and ideas about, how society could be organized in a different way. They also have a drive to actually really do that, inspire other people and drive change. And it's those that I'm talking to. I'm like, this is the time to get up. You cannot sit at tables where decisions are made and accept that you're always shut out. I mean, we could talk about inclusion. That's another word I really detest. I remember we talked about that before. We need to come and sit at the table and claim our voices.
Yeah, exactly. Speak our truth, claim our voice by just speaking, basically, right? And I love that you say that you detest this word, quote unquote, because, this is one of the words that I love the most also from another point of view. I even used it in my master's thesis a
I
lot.
know.
Because I was like, yes, we need inclusion, but it's about what definition do you use for whatever
Yes.
it is that you're saying? Yeah. So the definition that I have of this word is we all come together hand in hand, heart to heart, and we all speak vulnerably, openly about our challenges, about our vision, about everything. Yes. And that means really everyone throughout all sensitivity scales and all belief systems and everything, and we just look at what works for everyone and not
I
only for a
agree with
few.
you. And Yeah, yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you there. I mean, what my problem with that word is, it's just a label that's being used in order to actually achieve something else. And that is not inclusion. It's just like, oh, you can sit at my table. I will include you, but shut up. Don't say anything. Right? So it's that game where words are being hijacked. Let's call it the system, and they're actually warped, and they're being manipulated into something their potential does not get expressed, the potential you were talking about, right? And I actually, the other word that I was looking for just came up. It's human capital. I mean, just imagine if you really sit down and think about what that word means. It means that we are slaves. That's what it means. We are the same as, what's the English word for that? Sand, concrete, wheat, stones, timber. That's what we are. We're a capital. I mean, just think, if you really sit down and think what that word means, that needs to go. That concept of what humanity thinks about themselves, to me, that is a form of insanity.
Exactly. The way we see ourselves as humanity, right? Exactly. I love that. So let's go a little bit deeper into how the HSPs have been manipulated, bullied, and all of that sort of things, and how that happens usually in childhood already and then goes throughout their lives, and how to break out of that.
Right. Most highly sensitive people that I know, and my clients, myself, my friends, it starts really, really early, just like you said. And it starts usually for two reasons. One is being born in a dysfunctional family and taking responsibility for pain of everyone in that system in order to be able to survive. I wouldn't even say emotionally, physically survive, because we are community beings, right? So especially, when we're that young, we need a community in order to survive. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, if we have parents or siblings that are not highly sensitive, the likelihood, I'm not saying it's 100%, but the likelihood that we're always too much. Yeah, we ask too many questions, we are too sensitive about this and about that. I mean, that sentence, "you are too much," all of us have heard. So that is what usually stands at the beginning of the journey. And then we have to go into a school system that was made for factory workers. It was probably made with good intent, because it is very powerful to teach people how to write and how to read, right? A long time ago, power was in the hands of those that could do that. So I'm saying the intent was probably really good, but then again, it was misused in order to create people that ingest information, don't reflect on that information, and just spew it out again when it's needed in a certain context. I'm being very harsh here, but I'm over, in German you would say I'm overdrawing the picture, but just to make a point. And that is something that, to intelligent people and highly sensitive people, we just don't. We cannot fit in that mold without breaking. Right? I mean, look at Einstein, his teacher thought he was stupid.
Not only him, as far as I've discovered, there are
Yeah, many,
other
many others.
very brilliant minds.
Very brilliant minds. No, because the system is not built for brilliant minds. The system is built to make everyone the same.
Exactly. There is this amazing picture with a monkey, a fish, an elephant, and then there's a teacher talking to them. And it's like, okay, for the final exam, we're all going to climb the tree. And the fish is like, okay.
Exactly. I love this. I love this. And the elephant is like, what kind of tree could possibly, serve me?
He goes first, and then nobody has to do it anymore because
Nobody
the
has a
tree is
problem.
gone.
Exactly. You have to
Yeah.
go first.
Yeah, exactly. So I love that very much. So, I mean, you're talking about these worn out frameworks. Yeah, it may seem harsh, but, the people who watch this video usually are people who are informed about a lot of things that are going on, even currently in the media. So it's not so far off what you're saying. It's maybe exactly the right wording. So thank you for that. So let's speak a little bit about slowing down and seeing clearly. Because let's be honest, you just touched on that exactly framework. Yes, it's like you grow up and you're being told constantly, it's not only a once off or just a little bit here, a little bit there. You're being told constantly that your perceptions are wrong, that this is the way that reality works. So basically, you are not even able to see what's real, right? Then, on top of that, you're being blamed for being too sensitive, for being too much, for feeling too deeply, right? And then, on top of that, it's like this constant reassurance of you are not good enough, not in reality, and all of that, which most people would call even gaslighting, right? So, and that's how you grow up. So, and then it's like slowing down and seeing clearly. Well, it took me quite a while to get there. So, I would like to know, how has it been for you, not only personally, but also with your clients?
Right. A lot of questions. Let me see if I can pull
Process.
this apart. Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I actually forgot to say, when we talked about growing up, very often there's also the situation that our parents are trying to protect us by saying, don't be that sensitive, don't be that complicated, because they might have had life experiences over generations that being that way in that system creates a lot of pain, right? So that's an important point that I missed before. About my personal journey. Well, that's how I came up with that spectrum, and understanding that high sensitivity is just one aspect of what makes it challenging if you're different. So in my case, even, might sound like bragging, but it's important for my story, is I later found out that I have a really high IQ. And it made me understand why I didn't fit in at least two ways. As a very highly sensitive person, I think I check about 110% on the scale from Elaine Aron. And I had this deeply inquisitive mind. And, it would happen, at school and later at university, that the teacher would say something and I would start to laugh, 10 seconds before everybody else, or I had an answer. And I learned to suppress that because I always got into problems with, my schoolmates or even with teachers, right? And it took me until I went to the United States as a student, where my professors said, I can see you think, would you say what you were just ruminating on? And they slowly, brought me much closer to who I really was or who I really am. And then it took a really long time. Scroll forward 30 years while I was doing my master in music therapy. We had groups, we had to do group therapy, and the professor that we had was really, really good. And he left in the middle of the semester because his tenure was, ended. And he called me into his room and he said, I want to ask you something before I leave. And he said, why do you never ask the question, do I like that person? You always ask the question, does that person like me? And it really stopped me dead in my tracks. And I was already 50 or 53 at that point. And I was like, excuse me? But he hit a really, really important point. And he really deeply empowered me. I'll always be very grateful to him, because that is such a flip of frame. And he was right. He was absolutely right. I had disempowered myself and used my sensing skills, my empathic skills, always at the service of others. And now guess why? In order to be safe. In order to be safe and liked. Yeah. And that was a turning point for me. I said, if I may use this language, fuck this. I am done with this. I am just done with this. But he gave me the words and the frame. So I hope for those that listen, ask yourself that question really deeply. What am I doing that serves my need to feel safe in a group, to be liked, even though it deeply disempowers me, left, right, and center?
Thank you. I love that. And I just want to, okay, 3 things. So first of all, I love this story that you just shared with your professor. And those are people, it's like everything can be an activation if you allow it to be that for yourself. So the people who bring these messages forth, like your professor, is an activator for you. He played that role for you. And I also had one of these people in my life. And the question was a little bit different. It was more like, the statement that I had heard too many times was that something was totally fundamentally wrong with me, with my perceptions, with my feelings, with everything. So basically, I was at a point where I wouldn't trust my thoughts nor my emotions, right? And this person just looked me in the eye, totally calm, totally centered, really cool. And he was like, have you ever thought about the possibility that everything is all right with you and the world is just upside down?
I imagine. I can feel that. Yeah.
And I was like, what?
What? Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me? So like almost 30 years of conditioning just fell off my back. Like, what the? And this guy was really amazing. I love this guy. So he was a psychologist, but he was very energetically aware. Let's put it that way. So, and then you also touched on the people pleasing. I love that, and that's exactly the outcome that you get when you learn from a young age to regulate other people's nervous system, but not your own.
Yeah.
So that you start walking on eggshells. What can I say? What can I not say? In which way can I say it? That is okay, maybe, that I can be safe with, and all of that. So this is basically this fear-based, dysfunctional way of raising children. And it's the same way that if we don't pay attention and we are unconscious, we're going to step into later, So that is just like, the way it can go, but you have the choice. So when did this amazing change for you, or how did it develop, this amazing change from victimhood and people pleasing and all of that turn into you deciding, choosing your behaviors, and just going with your gut feeling?
Well, it has to do also with, what you mentioned about yourself. I think that's the one good thing about older age is that, hopefully one finally gets it that certain opinions are not relevant, right? Certain people are no longer relevant. apart from the fact, this might also serve some people, that at a certain point in my life, I realized that most people I had tried desperately to impress in my 20s and 30s, they were all gone. They were all gone, right? So it was like, why on earth did I try to impress these people so much? If at a point in time where I possibly arrived at a point where I could have impressed them, they're no longer there. So don't do that. Don't waste your time trying to be something or somebody for somebody else, because the likelihood that they will leave this planet before you do is huge, and you are left with the consequences of that choice, right? And I want to stress again what you said. We all, because you asked about my clients before, all of my clients, including you and I, we have experienced this. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. And I think that is the fundamental thing we need to get over. Every highly sensitive person I know, every client I've ever had, that's the first thing we do, is we re-examine the frame, just like that therapist did it with you. Is that true, that there is something wrong with me? And the next question is there anything to fix? And I believe there's nothing to fix. There's just something to unearth and steward in yourself.
I love what you said about don't try to become somebody, whoever that may be, for whomever it may be. It's like there is this movie with Ramdas, Becoming Nobody. So maybe some people want to watch that one. That ties into what you just said. Yeah. The thing is not about becoming whomever. It's about shedding all that doesn't belong and unearthing what is the true you.
Yeah. And, I belong to those stubborn people that life really has to put in a pressure cooker, in order to get me to change, unhelpful behavior. So it took a financial crisis, and it took a deep crisis in my marriage, and, and a breakup for me to finally arrive at the point where I said, I'm done with narcissists. That's another topic we could talk about, the toxic dance between sensitive people and narcissists. So it is, it's easy to do if you just look at narcissists in a job and, people that are removed from you, it becomes a completely different thing. It's the people near and dear to you and the way you've organized your life, your kids, your life, your house, your whatever, your whole situation, and your love and care for somebody else, and to then realize that that has been built on the old people pleasing, empathic, potential seeing person that does not take care of herself. So it took that wake up call for me to say, okay, the first thing was that professor, and then, took more pressure on my own system to say, okay, am I going to choose life, or am I going to choose this slow death? My choice, right?
Thank you. I love that you just said that. Let's dive a little bit into that before we go into narcissistic abuse and HSPs seeing the potential and basically going into relationships with other people, may it be a friendship or a partnership, but with the potential of the person. So let's just dive right into the narcissistic abuse and how that plays a role into becoming this super empath that we have inside of us.
I think I would like to reframe this a little bit, Carolina,
Yes.
because I think the empath is there before. The aspect that is dangerous is the people pleaser. And that is the traumatic aspect of an empath. So I think we need to keep those apart. And I know it's always called narcissistic abuse, but I'd like to reframe it in the sense, because it needs two to tango, right? So I call it the toxic dance between these two, between the HSPs and the narcissists, because they both actively do something or don't do something, right? But they both benefit. The HSP also benefits because it keeps having somebody whose potential they can develop and push, right? Which is something we love to do. It's just misdirected towards a person that is not willing to do that. But we can live that impulse. You know, we can sort of feel like we're the savior of that person, and so that, you know, that is something that we actively don't stop, because we don't know who we are if we don't do that. So my aim is to help people that have that aspect very strongly to put that into leadership where it can actually flourish, where that impulse of wanting to develop potential is put to a productive place, rather than emptying your battery with somebody who doesn't have the capacity to change because it threatens their own survival, right? And the narcissist, yes, it's a form of abuse, but if you really think of it deeply, what we do with them is also a form of abuse. Yeah, it doesn't have the same qualities. But for example, I remember also, again, during, you know, while I was studying music therapy, and, you know, you have to really look at yourself. And it occurred to me that this ability I had of reading other people, which is wonderful as a therapist, if you have that, and intuitively knowing, you know, sort of, I just had this really keen ability to look into people's hearts and bodies and actually read it like a sheet. It never occurred to me that that is overstepping. But while I was, you know, training to be a therapist, I was like, oopsie daisy. I'm actually trying to also protect myself by reading others. I'm constantly overstepping into people's privacy. And these are things, you know, we also need to understand, and to understand we're not just victims. We're also perpetrators in a certain way. Meaning, if I allow a narcissist to always drain me, I'm actually perpetrating an abusive relationship. We need to understand that and take responsibility for it.
Yes, I love how you say that. And that's exactly the point, you know, it's like everything is, there is one coin, it has two sides, pick and choose, right? And yes, this tango dance, exactly. Yeah, but everything is a dance, you know? It's like the waves of the ocean, it's a dance as well. Everything is basically a dance. The thing is like, what do you want, to which song do you want to dance? Which is the song? Are you picking the
Yeah.
song or not? And if you are like, no, I'm not picking the song, well, then think twice. Maybe you are picking the song just by not picking a new song. You know, you can change the
Yeah.
song anytime.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, tango is a really good metaphor here that you're using, because tango is very sensual. Tango is very intense, right? And highly sensitive people, whether they know it or not, love intensity. And if they're entangled with a narcissist, they get intensity galore. And we are addicted to that sort of depth. And again, ask yourself, do I want to leave that there? Or do I want to take that depth somewhere where it's productive or where I can actually enjoy and share it? Right? So most therapists will say, well, get rid of the depth in some way, reframe your depth. Or, I know a lot of therapists like that, or that, you know, ask you to change something about that. And I think you shouldn't change, as a highly sensitive person, you shouldn't change your depth, because that's not possible. But decide how you're going to share it, with whom you're going to share it, and to what use you put it. So, you know, if you are, I don't know, Rachmaninoff, whose music I love, I mean, there is intensity everywhere. And he made that available to other people to enjoy, right? He didn't waste that on people that didn't understand what this was about, just in order to be in a relationship where they can mimic intensity.
Yes. And I love that with the diff processing, it's like if your brain processes more data more thoroughly and deeply, well, how are you going to change that? Your brain is wired that way, and it's like, some
Thank
people
God.
tend to say, oh, I would like to, I don't know, have a heightened intuition and who knows, maybe even channeling or whatever it may be, something like that. Yeah, like, oh, these
Mhm.
ESPs and whatever, right? And then it's like, okay, so if you don't want to sense energy, subtleties very deeply, then how do you want to get there? Like,
Exactly.
first, you
Yeah.
need to be sensitive to whatever is here that you can perceive with your five senses. And then you can go to other senses, from there.
Exactly.
And it
Yeah, I
flows
agree. I
naturally,
agree.
actually,
Yeah, I agree totally.
like
You're right. Yeah.
get rid of
Yeah.
your debt. That's really funny. Okay. Also one way to see it. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper once more into how the ego informs the way that we interact with other people. May it be in business, may it be in normal relationships like friendships or partnerships and all of that. Because in my eyes, it is the same that keeps going throughout all the relationships. The way that I experienced it was that first I started being myself more, where I was certain, like for example, with friendships, I was like, I don't have to be friends with anybody per se, just because you showed up in my life, it doesn't mean that we have to be BFFs forever or something like that straight from the
Yeah.
get-go.
Mhm.
It's like, that would be fucking awesome. I would love that. And if we have such a deep connection, yes, yes, yes. But it's not a must, because otherwise, whatever, no. So it's an option, a nice, cool option. Let's explore that option. If I can be authentic with you, let's do that. That's awesome. And if not, well, what a pity. You know what I mean? And then it started taking over other different relationships and into other things in my life. And it expanded just from there. So, how do you experience that? And how has it shown up for your clients as well?
Catalina, I think I need some help here. What do you mean by ego?
So, the ego basically is the part of you that has this personality, right? The ego is part of your personality, it's part of your survival system. Yes, you see a tiger, you run, or you freeze and hide. The ego is this part of you that is primed to be able to be on earth and experience this earth plane. And then there is your soul, and your soul is completely untouched. Or if it feels completely low vibrational and you're like, "Blah, I don't like this," your soul, your higher self, they are all like, "Oh my God, another experience. We can expand, we can grow. Yay, let's do that." And your ego is like, "When I was a child, my mother did that to me. And now it's coming back again. And that's why I need to freeze or to run or to yell." So your ego is basically this part that
Okay.
is informing that, you know? So,
Okay. Thank you for that. I mean, because there's so many different um, definitions of ego. That's why I wanted to know. So, um, it is that tension between the soul and the personality. I I believe is very even stronger for sensitive people, because we so much more clearly sense the messages of our soul or the mission of our soul. Um, at least that's my belief. And I hear that reflected, or I see that reflected in my clients, or there might be bias. I don't know. Um, And the tension arises from living in an environment that is not suited to our mission. So many of us actually get a lot of challenges placed in our lives that we need to work through. Why that is so, I don't know. There are probably people that are better qualified to answer that question. But it seems like we need to go through a really hard school in order to arrive at the point where we started that podcast, and that is to say, enough is enough. I am going to express less of the traumatized personality, less of the personality that is adapted to a dysfunctional system. And in order to thrive, in order to live a life that is not just pain and agony and shame, which are low vibrational expressions, I'm going to step into claiming my talents, into expressing my talents, into expressing my soul, and making that my top priority. Don't know if that answers your question, but
I love that. Yeah, that goes back to the question, is this behavior that I am exhibiting or that I want to exhibit, part of the solution, or is it part of the problem in the first place, right? Thank you very much
yeah,
for that.
yeah. Let's just quickly look at these, excuse me, at these two words. Since you're also so deeply into spiritual stuff, I think naming something a problem is a problem. So if you could say your challenge is what you have to learn, what needs to be accomplished in order to get something else, a lesson learned, right? And then the solution, to me, it would be more helpful to call it a balanced and aligned place, right? Because otherwise we're always still in that programming of fixing something. I have to do step 1 to 10, and then I have my solution. I'll be happy ever after. Well, I can assure you from, being a lot older than you are, that ain't going to work. And you need to keep searching and not searching. You need to keep looking, integrating balance.
I love that very much. I think one of the big things of this podcast episode today has been for me, to be able to look at words, the definition that we hold of them, and how that shapes our perception completely and fully, And it's like we can use whichever word we choose to use, whatever, but we can at least know what is this other person talking about so that you can relate better. And I really love this very much, so thank you for doing this today with me, with us, with the audience, right? So now I want to ask you the most important question of this whole episode nonetheless. What is your highest vision for this new earth that we are co-creating right now?
Well, it is the book I'm writing, or the subject of the book that I'm writing, which is about sagacious leadership. It's about leaders that are more aligned with all the values we talked about. Leaders that, can get out of this lone wolf, narcissistic, extractive mindset and actually adopt something that will steward and regenerate our societies. So
Thank
that
you
is
very much.
my mission.
Yes, I really love that. Self-leadership and then leading by example with values in
Exactly.
front of us.
Yeah,
Totally
and
resonate
different
with that.
values. Yeah, and different values. And I like the way you say that, because I also structure it in the book that way. We need to do the work on ourselves. We need to do the inner work in order to be able to lead in a different way. You can't just pretend. You can't just arrive at that place from a theoretical point of view. You need to have it integrated inside your own ego. Yeah? In order to to lead what I call sagaciously. And, people can look that up. I know it's an old word, but it's grown dear to me over time.
Tell us your definition of this word, please, so that people have that.
So sagacious, I will actually read it to you because it's so many words if you look it up in the dictionary. So it's wise, knowledge that is applied with judgment, not just with manipulation, right? It's discerning. So we're back to this ability of highly sensitive people to actually become clear, to have a refined assessment of what's going on rather than knee-jerk reaction. It means people that are perceptive. To be sagacious is to be perceptive, to be quick in noticing things and noting the subtle. So, I mean, this word it means prudent, to be thoughtful and foresightful. And that is an English word I haven't heard before either. It's perspiracious, which means penetrating into complex dynamics. And it means canny, which means you're practical. So that word means so many things that this new leadership actually needs to contain, express, and be. That I just love that word. When I heard it the first time, I was like, oh no, this is an old word. I don't even know what that means. And then I started looking it up and I was like, wait, this is the perfect word for what I want to say.
I love that. And this first part that you talked about, this one that starts with wisdom. Yeah, that's exactly what I say. The place what we want to be is a place of wisdom, first of all and foremost, because that means that we have acquired knowledge through the understanding of information. And then we have applied this knowledge with discernment in our daily lives so that we have been integrated it in all of our being, and we have wisdom at the end of the day. And that's the super tasty cake that we get to eat then.
Yes, and see, my book is structured around 3 disciplines, which is perceive, discern, and act. So how in all these 3 disciplines, how do you do things differently, right, from the leadership we have now? Because again, we're back to words. What does the word perceive mean? It can mean a myriad of things. It can also be perceiving how I can extract and manipulate somebody the best way. That's also a way of perceiving, right? But that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? The words are very important, and we both know that. I mean, you have a multicultural background, so do I. And we've learned that things mean something different in different cultures. They mean something different within social strata. And if we want to, which is also something that's really important to me, translate the depth that we have for other people, we need to understand that words are very important. And that the communication about what do I mean and what do you mean by that word is essential. Because otherwise we get knee-jerk reactions all the time, right? Like with the word sensitive. I use the word sensitive in a completely different way than most male Americans. For them, it's like, please don't call me sensitive because that means I'm weak. For me, it means a lot of other things. So if we have an discussion about inclusion, we need to talk about what are we actually talking about.
Exactly. So that we don't get lost in semantics. It's like I may be using this word, but you could also use that word, that word, that word. Pick one, which one suits you best and feels best for you. But let's not get caught up into semantics, and let's just speak about the true things that are behind it. That is love, that is compassion, that is cooperation. No? What you have been speaking about the whole time, right?
Yeah, but look, Carolina, if you have a lot of trauma around love and somebody says to you, we need to center this more around love, your soul might think, great idea. Your ego, as you defined it, says, no way on earth. I don't trust this for even 5 seconds, right? So you have the interpretation people have of certain words and concepts are vital if we want to get this transformation right. It's very important. It's very important.
Well,
We don't have
yeah, I
time to
had
go into
this with the word God for a long
Yeah.
period of time. you know, like
Sure.
I didn't want to say, hear anything about God. It was like this Fuig word, you know. You don't use that word. And then it was the universe, you know what I mean? And that
Yes.
was okay, you know. And, you know, there was an evolution, right?
Right.
But this
Right.
evolution cannot happen if we don't open up and say, okay, there may be words that I don't resonate with, but let's speak about what are you really, really, really talking
Exactly.
about? What do you really mean? What is the core
Exactly.
of your of what you're saying? What's the core essence of your message here, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah, and that's using your HSP talents in order to bring positive change, right?
exactly.
We have that discernment, we have the depth, we have the curiosity. So apply it.
My God. Yes, exactly. It's about understanding first, because
Yes.
illusion cannot prevail if you have understanding.
Yes.
Those are amazing words, Jole. Do you have a final message for the audience?
To have a final message. I know it might sound harsh again, but my final message is wake up for God's sake.
Very good. And so it is.
And so it is.
Thank you for being here today. It was a joy and a pleasure connecting with you. And I love your harshness.
My German bluntness, the German half of me. Thank you so much, Carolina. This was great fun. And so thank you for allowing me a space to say what I have to say.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.